Welcome back to the Lars and Show. Glad to be with you and glad to take your phone calls and emails. I haven't gone back to check the show tapes, but I think I first talked about the China virus back in January. And I told my producers, I said, I think I'm going to call this the Wuhan flu, or the Wu flu for short. And I got some reactions from people outside of my circle of friends saying, well, you can't call it that, And I said, why not? It came from Wuhan. And we shorthand everything. Cellular phones are now cell phones. We, in fact, even phone is short for telephone. So we shorthand virtually everything, calling it the China virus, the Wuhan virus, the Wu flu, whatever you want to call it. It came from there, so that's what you call it. Well, that's what my friend Ann Coulter has written about in a bang-up column that she wrote. You can find her at anncoulter.com, and she joins me now. And you are right to point out the World Health Organization, which has not exactly been setting new records for a quick and speedy and sensible response to the China virus, was very concerned early on about being politically correct, weren't they?
Yeah, so the entire media is. I'd already written my column last night when the press conference started today, and this is all the journalists want to ask the President of the United States in the middle of a pandemic that they claim is going to kill millions of Americans. Why are you calling it the Chinese virus? Why are you calling it the Wu? There are reports that someone in the White House called it the Kung flu, which is fantastic. I'd already used that in my column. I was disappointed it came out before my column came out. No, this is all our journalists can do today. Who cares if millions of Americans die as long as the Chinese aren't stigmatized? Well, the bulk of my column is that, we ought to be stigmatizing the Chinese. Why on earth have we outsourced all of our manufacturing to them? If this doesn't put a halt to it, that's what Trump should be talking about. I wish he would send out his magnificent trade guy, Peter Navarro, to take these questions. I run through the various products, which, by the way, it's hard to look this stuff up because the media doesn't exactly talk about it. The dog food that killed American dogs, the toothpaste that had antifreeze poison in it. Remember the drywall scandal, the toxic Chinese drywall? Hundreds of thousands of homes had this drywall put into it that leaked some noxious fumes that smelled like spoiled eggs. People were sickened by it. It destroyed the wiring, the pipes, the air conditioning. It cost millions of dollars. All of that Chinese drywall had to be pulled out, the wiring replaced, the refrigeration replaced, and pretty much every utterly creepy, exotic flu pandemic that has leapt from animals to humans, weirdly enough, it comes from China and their wet markets, something I describe being predicted just 2 years ago in the Smithsonian magazine by a Chinese reporter, very impressive woman, the Beijing bureau chief for, I think, Newsweek at one point and so on and so forth, and Smithsonian, if anything, they're on the PC side of things. She titled her article 2 years ago, "Will the next pandemic come from China?" And her description, and I do recommend, I put links in my column at anncoulter.com to a lot of these articles and the backup to all of this, because it was hard enough to find, thought you guys might want to find it. The story is really sort of spellbinding. I mean, she lives in China. She describes her experience going to these wet markets, and in one short paragraph kind of clearly explains why so many viruses come out of these wet markets. Why are we outsourcing all of our production to China? I mean, it is just outrageous that they're making our pharmaceuticals. They're making our masks. They're making the ingredients for masks that are even made in this country. Alexander Hamilton was right. We should make the stuff we need here. What if this is bad enough, them lying about the coronavirus for 3 weeks. I don't know if you saw, Axios has an article today saying if China had not covered up the outbreak of the Wuhan virus for 3 solid weeks, there would be 95% fewer cases now. 95% fewer cases. No, China is not our friend. I'm sick of these Wall Street robber barons becoming zillionaires. The wealth inequality is coming from this insane globalism that benefits a very, very, very few. Oh, the multinational corporations, they make loads of money. But you'll be killing your dog, sickening yourself, perhaps dying from the Wuhan virus.
Well, and here's the thing, Ann. People can say, well, big corporations are just being cheap. They should understand that an awful lot of what's pushed all this overseas is when you say it's really hard to make the base materials, say, for pharmaceuticals in the United States. It's not just more expensive, but the additional regulatory burden that's almost entirely put on by Capitol Hill. The company that says we need the base materials for these ordinary pharma products, where can we make them? Well, in the United States, you're going to deal with OSHA, you're going to deal with EEOC, you're going to deal with all these regulations.
You're going to deal with trial lawyers suing every time a woman, minority, or disabled person gets fired or happens to want to leave and will accuse, Michael Bloomberg of telling a mean joke. No, you're absolutely right. That's what needs to be done to make it easier to hire Americans. But also, as with the case of cheap immigrant labor, it seems to be cheap. It's cheap to the person buying it, but it's very expensive for society. Illegal immigration, well, who's paying for their housing, for their schooling, for all those anchor babies, for their medical care? You are middle-class America when it comes to Chinese toothpaste, dog food that kills dogs, drywall that poisons, that sickens homeowners and destroys the home, and Wuhan virus. Who's paying for that? You are a middle-class taxpayer, and meanwhile, the heads of the multinational corporations and the Wall Street titans who are negotiating these international deals, no, they're living like kings.
Well, and if you think about this, Ann, I told somebody earlier today, about 10 years ago, there was a company in my neck of the woods that said, we're going to build the all-American house. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, an awful lot of the materials, screws and nuts and, all these other things come from China, including the bad drywall. And I said, well, how much more will that cost? I mean, I want to know because I want to be able to sell it to people. People will pay a premium for something that they say, I'm buying this made in America.
Yes.
Well, clothing...
Right now it would be astronomical. It wouldn't have to be over the long term, though.
No, but try this. I said, well, how much more? And he said 3 to 5%. I said, so a $300,000 house. No, he said for a $300,000 house, you can build it for 3 to 5% more. I said, so the most I might pay more if I'm buying a typical house in America, I think is $250. But say it's $300, make the math easy for me because I'm an idiot. It would cost you $315,000. And then I like numbers, so I said, how much would that change your mortgage? And I think we came down to that your mortgage would be $4.52 a month more over 30 years to buy an all-American house, certified all-American, every single thing in it or on it, made in America. Or you could save $15,000 and $4.52 a month on your mortgage over 30 years if you had it made with a bunch of Chinese drywall screws and Chinese this and Chinese that. And I don't know where the effort has gone. I haven't checked back, but for a couple of years they were selling these all-American houses. And they said one of the toughest things was there are all these
getting the material.
Well, but the spot
it isn't really being sold. I mean, that's what we're discovering now, that everything comes from China. The plants aren't running. There aren't manufacturers. There aren't employees of manufacturing plants. Once we bring things back, oh, no, I will definitely trust the American worker, minus, as you say, idiotic regulations. But we do have some quality control regulations that they dispense with in China. That's what makes their goods so much cheaper. Oh, we don't have to worry if we're putting melamine in the dog food. Before we run out of time, I want to throw in one more point so it doesn't sound like I'm being hysterical, as you will see at the end of my column.
Yeah.
The other thing they're not telling us about the Chinese virus is that it's less dangerous for people without chronic conditions under the age of 60 than the seasonal flu. The big thing, I think we talked about this last week, as I suspected, it's people mostly in their 70s and 80s. It is much more dangerous. But if you are 60 or below and don't have a chronic condition, particular kinds of chronic medical problems, it's less fatal than the seasonal flu, and we don't shut down the country for that. So what we ought to be doing is, as I jokingly say, it's a metaphor, send the National Guard to surround nursing homes and let the rest of us go about our business so that the economy doesn't collapse. The main thing is, and all of you listening, be very, very careful with any older people. A little bit people in their 60s. It's about as bad as the 2017, 2000.
That is Ann Coulter.
The Lars Larson Show.